Okay, so the question that we have from YouTube is that I shed some light on the different types of strikes, full lip strikes, T-strikes, ANSI strikes, and whatnot. And there's certainly a lot of different strikes that could be taken into consideration when we talk about different types of strikes. I'm not an expert on door strikes, but I have noticed some truths about door strikes and where you're going to use them and why you'll use them and how you might need to tweak what you're using. So why don't we move on and talk about that? Okay, so the question begins now. Can you shed some light on the practical uses of different types of strikes, such as full lips, T-strikes, ANSI strikes, etc.? I'm not understanding what the application differences are. I understand the aesthetics are different, true, but is there a structural or security implication by them being different? Okay, so let's dive into that. So first of all, in the world of strikes, the short version of this is there's generally three. There are full lip strikes. Sometimes we call those D strikes, like the letter D. There are T strikes. Sometimes we call them T strikes because they look like the letter T. Then there are ANSI strikes, American National Standards Institute. Sometimes we call it an ASA strike, ASA. Primary differences, some guesswork involved, is once upon a time, I don't believe D strikes really existed. I have one right here, okay? You can get the idea of why we would call that a D strike. You can also get the idea of why we'd call it a full lip strike, because it's all lip. It's full lip. These are 2 1/4 tall. And then they are generally, from the center line of the screw hole, which is where they're measured, to the edge of the lip is generally 1 1/16, 1 1/8, 1 3/16, maybe a little bit less, plus or minus. Depends on the manufacturer, and it really depends on what they're doing. So the lip length is really important to think about if you want to. Now, if you go buy a lock and it's got the strike in it and the lip length is the lip length, that's just the standard. That may not be the lip length that you need, because you may have an application where the door is pushed into the frame deeper than normal, or you have a thick casing condition, or you have a condition where the wall has been built straight up to the face of the frame, so that when you go to close the door, your latch bolt is literally hitting the wall structure before it hits the lip of the strike. Very common in roller latches that are used in kitchen cabinetry applications. You can walk into a high-end kitchen and it's all woodwork. The front of the refrigerator, the pantry, those are applications where you might need an extended lip. And yes, this manufacturer, in fact, Don Joe, they manufacture extended lip strikes for roller latches. So a full lip strike is probably, for my part, going to be associated with relatively modern construction, used exclusively in residential applications. Your Quicksets, your Schlage F series, on and on and on. If you were looking at a T-strike, let's pull one of those out. That's a T-strike. You can look at that strike and you can figure out why we call it a T-strike, because if you use your imagination, it looks like the letter T. If we looked in a Schlage catalog from 1960, it's probably all T-strikes. That's just what would be normal. That's what would be typical. Why would the industry may have phased from T-strikes to D-strikes? Probably because it's less work to mortise these. This is going to require more work to mortise this. You'll also notice that this lip length is much shorter. It's just the standard strike lip length that comes with this lock that I pulled it out of. Doesn't mean it's what you need, it's just the standard. Now, the next primary strike that we're dealing with is called the ASA or ANSI strike. Before we get to that, you'll notice that this D strike has radiused corners here. Now you can do radiused corners or you can do square corner. The only difference that's going to occur between all of this stuff is radius corners are really common because they are easier to mortise. Once again, that 1/2-inch diameter router bit that's going through the jamb or the edge of an inactive door, they don't have to go back and square those corners out. That's why radius corner exists. I've never seen a radius corner T-strike, and I've never seen a radius corner ASA strike. So just in the full lip D-strikes is where you're going to see that. Now, an ANSI strike. Well, this is probably why you came. Let's talk about ASA or ANSI strike.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Okay, what's the deal with an ANSI strike? Well, first of all, these are always 4 7/8 tall. Always. They will have, generally, if it's used with a lock, they're going to have 1 hole or possibly 2. They are specifically intended mostly for use in hollow metal frames. The full lip strikes and the T-strikes, you'll use them in wood frames. You certainly use these in wood frames as well. But the full lip strikes, you're not going to see those in hollow metal frames, even though hollow metal frames can be done for them. T-strikes you're going to see in wood frames primarily, but you can see them in hollow metal frames as well, especially 1960s, 1970s construction in mid-story residential buildings that had hollow core 7'4" wood doors, and then they had just small throat hollow metal frames. T-strikes are going to be common there. But the ASA strike, now why? Why do we need such a big strike? It's really important, actually. Here's the bottom line, and this is the moment. Where that hole is located, that hole is centered in this strike. I know that it is. That is going to be appropriate for a cylindrical lock, such as this low-end import knockoff cheapie. It happened to be the closest thing that I could grab. Just put that together, okay? Door is going to come closed, latch is going to hit that, and when it's all said and done, it's going to reside just like that, okay? That's a guard locking tab. That tab is never to go in this hole. Common mistake that people make when it's installed, it is to not look like that. It needs to look like that. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. I can go up and push that latch bolt in. If the door swings out, I can get right to the latch bolt and I can kind of just jimmy that open. Now, you'll notice I can push that in. Can I push it in now? Nope, because I'm holding the deadlocking tab down. That's why the deadlocking tab needs to always be engaged by being kept in a retracted position when it's properly installed. Guard locking, deadlocking, guarded would be another term. You're always going to see guarded latch bolts on keyed lock sets or an exit lock, like a Schlage A25 will have a guard latch. And it's interesting, there is a contractor that supplies privacy sets that we've sold that end up in the Navy's fleet of submarines. Those privacy sets would normally not have a deadlocking latch bolt. They would normally have a spring latch. Same thing, just doesn't have the guard lock or the deadlocking tab. Except they want deadlocking latch bolts to be on those privacy sets, and that is, when it's properly installed, it's definitely going to keep the bolt engaged in the hole in the strike better, is just the bottom line. So that it may be the application of a submarine at sea where they want those doors to stay latched by all means possible. That's probably what the deal is. Now, the point of me showing that to you was in a cylindrical lock, that hole needs to be right in the center, okay? Right in the center. Well, what happens if you have a mortise lock? Okay. What happens here now is the center line of the latch bolt is no longer in the center of the preparation. A cylindrical lock, which is what this is, the top of the door to the center of the hole, let's say it's 43 9/16. That's the center line for the latch. The center line for the latch here is not 43 9/16. It's going to be 43 9/16 plus 3/8. In almost all instances, there is a 3/8 relocation of center line on mortise locks. Why is that? There's a reason, and here's the... This lock has a deadbolt. This is a, well, actually, this is a Dorma 9974 function. I happen to know that. This is a function that requires a cylinder, at least one, has a deadbolt, has a guard. So check it out. Oh, let's do this. I can push that in, right? When I hold the guard lock in, I can no longer push it in. Here's the deal. If that hole was in the center, if I use this strike for that latch, my deadbolt is no longer going to fit in the preparation. The deadbolt is too high to work within the remaining real estate of the strike body, of the strike face. So what they do, they need to scooch that down ever so slightly, 3/8, so that you can fit a guard locking function, a latch function, and a bolt function within the amount of real estate that's permitted in 4 7/8 of an inch. They move that latch, that hole for the latch down. They add a second hole up here for the deadbolt, and they both fit in really nice. And generally, the guard locking tab will go in the piece of metal right in the middle, is what that's going to be.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Let's see if I actually have an example. I should. Yeah. Well, this is a bad example. A lot of manufacturers do this. That's how Dorma and others account for a latch and a deadbolt. It's just one big giant cutout. I don't like that. The advantage now is it's non-handed. The disadvantage of this design is this hole is consistent all the way down. What I mean by that is this hole on both sides is flat. Now, if you were to grab a Baldwin mortise lock, an Estates Baldwin mortise lock, for sure, they are not going to supply you with this. They're going to supply you with a strike that is handed for the lock and has the quantity of holes for the function. One hole if it's just a latch, 2 holes if it has a latch and a deadbolt. Okay, but one neat thing about the high-end lock manufacturers, Accurate in Connecticut, Accurate Lock, Baldwin, the hole for the deadbolt is actually not on the same center line as everything else. It's slightly pushed towards the pull side of the door. Why would they do that? Well, here's why. You go and you take that nice door and that fancy Baldwin lock you have, you pull the door closed, that door immediately hits the weather stripping. What happens next? You let go, but the door really just relaxes ever so slightly. It just moves out a little bit. If the hole for the deadbolt wasn't askew off center ever so slightly, the amount of relaxing that it does, because the weather stripping is saying, hey, 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 push me, I push you. So the weather stripping is pushing back, and if it wasn't off center a slight amount, you would try to take that deadbolt and throw it and it wouldn't go. Have you ever installed a lock and a strike and you had to file the strike? Yep, something's off center. Something's not machined correctly. Or have you ever thought that you were supposed to stick the guard lock tab inside the hole and you got busy with filing it? No, that's wrong. Some people do it because they just have to get the job done, but that's wrong. It needs to look like that. A lot of manufacturers do these because it's non-handed. I don't like it. I want, you know, the mortise lock is handed anyway. I happen to know that this is a right hand. I know it is because I know what this looks like. This latch is arranged for a right hand, and these 2 screws that are on this side tell me that this is the secured side. So this is a right hand lock. It's not left hand reverse. I know that it's not because this is the side where the trim is always active. So those are some generic differences of strikes. Then you're going to get into other strikes. Here's the security strike from Don Joe. This is 12-inch. Why would you use this? Well, someone kicked the door in and split the jamb, or you left your keys inside and had no way to get in, so you kicked the door in and split the jamb. Security strikes like this for a lock and a deadbolt, whatever, lots of variations of these, lots of lengths, and etc., etc. Now, the commenter also asked about security. Well, Security is not going to be inherently different from one strike to the next, except that it's true that you want to remove as little of the door or the frame as possible. You don't want to mortise a bunch of it away. You could also make the argument that steel or stainless steel is going to resist a kick-in attack better than wood. That's probably true. So if I was taking this and trying to kick the lock in or whatever, it's probably going to be harder to break this big piece of steel. Okay. You'll notice that this security strike has screws in different lengths. Why is that? The long screws are meant to go on the inside to the point where you can drive them into the stud behind, not just the 3/4 whatever lumber that you're mortising the strike to. You'll be able to sink that down into the stud for security purposes. Security deadbolt strikes are going to be longer and rectangular and have really long screws for getting through the jamb, through the shim space, and then into the studs that are behind there. You can order custom strikes. There are, you might have a need for a particular height, a particular lip length, a particular treatment to the corners. Lip length is absolutely something that you need to think about. We'll pull that up. But the bottom line is, when it comes to strikes like this, you're generally going to just order the lock as the way it comes standard. But before you get to that point, you need to say, what's my frame prep for? Will the lock come with the strike that I need for my application? If you're mortising them in your own shop, those full lip strikes are going to be easier, especially when they are radiused corner. If you're going for more traditional stuff, like what you'll probably see commonly in Baldwin, MTech, Omnia, the higher end folks, it'll be T-strikes. If you're doing anything mortise lock related, it's always going to be an ANSI 4 7/8 strike. If you are dealing with commercial grade hardware, you'll have a 4 7/8 strike. Again, hollow metal frames, you're going to deal with it. If you're doing a hospital and you've got all these doors, they're all steel frames and 4 7/8 strikes, but then you might have a religious figure on staff, and you might have a chapel in the hospital as well. There's probably going to be the same commercial grade mortise locks there, but you'll probably have wood doors and wood frames. You're still going to use a 4 7/8 strike. Now, this lock that I have here doesn't include a dust box. If you've got a wood frame or a hollow metal frame, unless you have a dust box, which is historically it's a metal box that goes behind here so that when you look in the hole, you don't see the wall construction, or the particulate of the wall doesn't creep through the hole. You're going to want dust boxes. If you're ordering strikes, you're going to want to think about dust boxes. You don't want to really see the chiseled and the routed particulate of the leftover jam that's there, so you'll want a dust box. You'll be able to get dust boxes either from the manufacturer of the lock or from someone else. Cal Royal, this is a Cal Royal lock that I happen to pull off the shelf. I'm sure that they have dust boxes, but what if they didn't? Meaning the question is, what would you do at that point if you wanted dust boxes? Well, you're just going to reach out to us and we're going to find you a manufacturer of dust boxes based on the height of the strike that you're dealing with, whether it be 4 7/8 or 2 1/4. Oh, I didn't mention that T-strike, those are always 2 3/4 tall. Coincidentally, the height of a deadbolt strike in a jam is 2 3/4, but the bolt face on a deadbolt is generally 2 1/4, which is the same height as a full lip or a D strike. Specialty strikes outside of that is going to end up being things such as particular requirements based on the hardware. You could have, again, a roller latch. That's going to be not unusual. You could have a derivative strike that's going to be based on rabbeted door edges. Those are not impossible to encounter either. It really all boils down to, before you order the hardware and then arrange the carpenter to come, that you've done your research. You've compared what you're getting to what's existing, thinking through the steps of how you're going to install it, looking at the cut sheet and the template for the hardware that you're considering, and understanding it here before you proceed. But when it comes to different strikes, that's really all I can think of about the general overall basics of different strikes. If you have need for anything custom, we can accommodate that. What we need to do now is we need to determine what the lip length is, and the lip length is just simply this.
If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it.
Okay, how to determine strike lip length is simply this, and I'm looking, I don't remember the formula, I've forgotten it 1,000 times. You take half of the door thickness plus the inset of the door, which is actually the proper term. You take the projection of your trim, and then you add 1/4 inch for a curved lip strike or 1/8 of an inch for a flat lip strike. So let's just stare at it together. We should be able to see that without too much trouble. That's exactly what it looks like. Take half of your door thickness, add your inset here, add the thickness of your trim here. If you have a curved lip strike, add 1/4 inch. If you have a flat lip strike, add 1/8 of an inch. Okay? That's how you do it. Now, there's one specialty strike that will take a flat lip strike, and that's if you have a pair of doors and a flat astragal. You're going to want a strike appropriate for the lock function, but with a 7/8 lip length. 7/8 lip length. The lip length is going to be in your manufacturer's catalog. 1 3/16 for Schlage, plus or minus. But we stock lip lengths that are probably 4 inch or longer, 5 inch. 1.5 inch, 1 3/4, 2 inch, 2.5, etc., etc., etc. Because you could have an application where, yep, that latch bolt's hitting prematurely. You don't want that to scratch your woodwork, scratch your stucco, whatever the treatment of what's over the cast concrete. But that's really it. And that's the formula right there. We'll hold that on there, and you can pause this video and absorb that. It's worth taking a look before you order 20 strikes. I'm only saying this because it's happened. You order 20 strikes, you waited 3 weeks for black and radius corner, and you didn't think about the lip length. I wouldn't either if I wasn't a hardware person. Word of the wise, think about it. If you have any questions on anything hardware related, I really hope you reach out to us, and thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.